Commander Yuki stretched his long, scaled arms and laughed as he watched the tactical hologram floating above his command chair. The blue dots representing human ships looked so small and insignificant compared to the massive red cloud that was his Vraxian fleet. 200 of the Empire's finest warships, each one bristling with plasma cannons and quantum torpedoes, surrounded 12 tiny human vessels that looked like they'd been pulled from a scrapyard. "Sub-Commander Crix, look at this joke," Yuki called to his second-in-command, his 4 golden eyes sparkling with cruel amusement. "The humans actually think those rust buckets can stand against us. I've seen cargo haulers with better armor plating." The bridge of the Death's Whisper, Yuki's flagship, buzzed with activity as Vraxian officers prepared for what they assumed would be the easiest victory of their careers. The ship's bioluminescent panels pulsed with anticipation, casting eerie shadows across the reptilian faces of the crew. "Sir, shall we simply vaporize them?" asked Weapons Officer Zeth, his claws dancing over the firing controls. "It would save time. These humans aren't even worth taking as slaves." Yuki waved a dismissive hand. "Not yet. I want to savor this moment. It's been 3 rotations since we've encountered such pathetic resistance. Let's see if they beg first." Meanwhile, aboard the lead human vessel, Soul's Pride, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Captain Lee Hanna sat calmly in her command chair, watching the massive alien fleet surround her small flotilla. Her ship's bridge was clean and efficient, with soft blue lighting that gave everything a peaceful feel. Unlike the Vraxian flagships, intimidating spikes and weapon ports, the Soul's Pride looked almost civilian. Smooth hull plating, minimal visible armaments, and a design that suggested exploration rather than warfare. "Captain, their formation is textbook aggressive encirclement," reported Lieutenant Park Minho from his position at the sensor station. His fingers moved quietly across the touchscreen displays, gathering data that the aliens had no idea was being collected. "They're clearly expecting immediate surrender." "Of course they are," Captain Lee replied, adjusting her uniform jacket with practiced calm. "Look at us from their perspective. We must seem like a merchant convoy that wandered into the wrong neighborhood." Lieutenant Kim Jisoo, the tactical officer, suppressed a small smile as she monitored her console. Hidden beneath the ship's unremarkable exterior, systems that the Vraxians couldn't even imagine were quietly coming online. "Captain, the Harmony Network is establishing connections with all fleet vessels. Estimated time to full tactical integration, 4 minutes, 30 seconds. "Excellent timing, Lieutenant." Lee nodded approvingly. "Remember, people, we're not just representing Earth today. Every species watching this engagement will judge humanity based on how we handle this situation." The communications array crackled to life as the Vraxian fleet transmitted on all human frequencies. Sub-Commander Crix's reptilian face appeared on the main screen, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air in a gesture of anticipation. "Attention, human insects," Crix hissed, clearly enjoying his role as messenger. "Commander Yuki of the Vraxian Third Fleet offers you one chance to avoid complete annihilation. Surrender your vessels immediately. Submit to neural conditioning, and you may serve the Empire as worker drones. Refuse, and we will turn your ships into expanding clouds of superheated gas." The human bridge crew exchanged glances. Several officers had to bite back laughter at the aliens' theatrical delivery. They'd encountered this type of bully before, species that relied on intimidation because they'd never faced real opposition. "Shall I respond, Captain?" asked Communications Officer Lieutenant Song Dami, her hand hovering over the transmission controls. "Put me through to their commander directly," Lee instructed, smoothing back her black hair and adopting the expression, "Serve someone genuinely considering surrender." Commander Yuki's massive form filled the screen moments later. The Vraxian leader was an imposing sight, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light, with 4 golden eyes that glowed with predatory intelligence. Battle scars crisscrossed his hide, testament to dozens of conquered worlds. "So the humans send a female to lead them into defeat," Yuki rumbled, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "How fitting. Your species' weakness is already apparent." Captain Lee maintained her polite smile, though anyone who knew her well would have recognized the dangerous stillness that settled over her features. Commander Yuki, I presume. Your reputation precedes you. We've heard stories of your efficiency in dealing with smaller civilizations. And now you face that efficiency personally, Yuki replied, leaning forward in his command throne. Look around you, human. 200 ships of the line against your pathetic dozen. My weapons could glass your homeworld. My shields could stop a supernova. What possible response could you have to such overwhelming superiority? You make excellent points, Commander, Lee acknowledged, her tone remaining conversational. Your fleet is indeed impressive. Those quantum torpedo arrays must pack quite a punch, and I can see your plasma battery configurations from here. Very intimidating. Yuki's chest swelled with pride. Most species begged or threatened at this point, but this human seemed to genuinely appreciate Vraxian military might. Finally, a primitive with sense. You recognize power when you see it. Oh yes, I always make it a point to study power, Lee replied quietly. Behind her, Lieutenant Kim Jisoo held up 2 fingers. 2 minutes until full tactical integration. In fact, I'm curious about something. How many species have surrendered to you without a fight? Dozens, Yuki boasted. When civilizations see the might of the Vraxian Empire, they understand the futility of resistance. Only fools fight battles they cannot win. Wise words, Lee nodded. I wonder, though, have you ever encountered a species that appeared weak but turned out to be something else entirely? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Yuki's reptilian features. There was something in the human's tone, a confidence that didn't match her desperate situation. Enough games, he growled. Surrender now, or face annihilation. Captain Lee's smile never wavered. Commander, you've been most generous with your time. I appreciate your patience while we discuss terms among our fleet. The transmission ended, leaving Yuki staring at a blank screen with growing unease. Commander Yuki's claws scraped against the metal armrest of his command throne as he watched the chronometer tick by. 10 minutes. 10 whole minutes these humans had been discussing terms, while his mighty fleet waited like common space pirates. His scaled hide rippled with irritation as he contemplated the insult to Vraxian efficiency. Sub-Commander Crix, he barked, his 4 golden eyes narrowing to slits. How long does it typically take a doomed species to accept reality? Usually 30 seconds, sir, Crix replied, checking his tactical display. The Zolonian Confederacy held out for 2 minutes before begging for mercy. These humans are either incredibly stupid or what? Yuki demanded. Or they're stalling for some reason we haven't identified yet. The bridge fell silent, except for the low hum of the ship's bioneural processors. Every Vraxian officer knew their commander's legendary impatience. Entire civilizations had been reduced to ash because they took too long to surrender. Science Officer Venth looked up from her sensor array, her reptilian features creased with confusion. Commander, I'm detecting some unusual energy patterns from the human vessels. The readings are strange. Yuki's attention snapped to the holographic display floating above Venth's station. 12 small dots representing the human ships, pulsed with faint energy signatures that seemed to shift and change as he watched. Define strange, Officer Venth. Sir, their power outputs are fluctuating in patterns I've never seen before. It's almost like their reactors are cycling through different configurations every few seconds. And there's something else. She paused, manipulating the display to enhance the readings. I'm detecting quantum resonance signatures that shouldn't be possible with their apparent technology level. Yuki dismissed her concerns with a wave of his massive hand, probably their primitive reactors failing under stress. These humans clearly don't maintain their equipment properly. Look at those ships held together with salvaged parts and desperation. But even as he spoke, something nagged at the back of his mind. In his 30 years of conquest, he'd learned to trust his instincts. And right now those instincts were telling him something was wrong with this picture. Sir, called Weapons Officer Zeth from his position at the firing controls, shall we end this charade? My crews are getting restless. They want to see these human ships burn. Yes, Yuki decided, his patience finally exhausted. Begin the attack. Target their lead ship first, the one with the female commander. I want to watch her face when she realizes her mistake. The order rippled through the Vraxian fleet like wildfire. 200 warships adjusted their positions with predatory grace, weapon ports opening like the eyes of sleeping giants awakening. The space around the human flotilla lit up with targeting. Lasers as the alien fleet prepared to demonstrate why the Vraxian Empire ruled this sector of the galaxy. "All ships commence firing," Yuki roared. The attack was magnificent in its brutality. Brilliant streams of plasma energy lanced across the void, followed by quantum torpedoes that left trails of distorted space-time in their wake. The concentrated firepower of an entire fleet focused on 12 small targets should have resulted in immediate vaporization. Yuki leaned forward in anticipation, already composing the victory report he would send back to the Empire. But as the light from the weapons fire faded, his expression changed from satisfaction to confusion. The human ships were still there. Not only were they still there, but they hadn't even moved. They drifted in the same formation as before, as if the devastating barrage had been nothing more than a light show. "What in the void?" Yuki muttered, his four eyes focusing intently on the tactical display. "Sir, sensors confirm direct hits on all human vessels," Zeth reported, his voice tight with disbelief. "Our weapons found their targets, but their shields are somehow still holding." "Impossible!" Yuki slammed his fist down on his armrest, the impact echoing through the bridge. "Those ships can't possibly have shield generators powerful enough to absorb that much punishment. Look at them. They're barely held together." Science Officer Venth worked frantically at her station, running detailed scans of the human fleet. "Commander, this doesn't make sense. Their hull configurations suggest minimal defensive capabilities, but the energy readings I'm getting now are off the charts. It's like they're running entirely different ships than what we're seeing." "Then scan deeper," Yuki commanded. "Find me their weak points." Meanwhile, aboard the Soul's Pride, the atmosphere remained eerily calm, despite having just absorbed enough firepower to level a small moon. Captain Lee Hanna sat in her command chair, watching the tactical display with the same professional interest she might show while reviewing training exercises. "Damage report," she requested calmly. "Shields at 97% and holding." "Steady," reported Lieutenant Park Minho from the engineering station. The adaptive matrix absorbed their energy patterns exactly as predicted. No hull damage to any vessel in the fleet. Lieutenant Kim Jisoo looked up from her tactical console, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Captain, weapon." "Analysis is complete. The Vraxian plasma streams operate on a predictable frequency modulation, and their quantum torpedoes use standard spatial distortion warheads. The defensive grid has catalogued and countered all incoming threat patterns." "Outstanding work, Lieutenant." Lee nodded approvingly. "Time to full tactical integration. Harmony protocol will be complete in 90 seconds, Captain. All 12 ships are now operating as a single combat unit." Captain Lee touched her communicator. "This is the captain to all hands. Phase 1 defensive trials have concluded successfully. All departments, prepare for Phase 2 operations. Show our guests what human engineering can really accomplish." Back on the Vraxian flagship, panic was beginning to set in. Commander Yuki watched his weapons officers frantically adjust their targeting systems, trying to find some vulnerability in the human ships that continued to mock his fleet's firepower. "Increase power to all weapon arrays," he bellowed. "I want maximum destructive output. Turn those ships into scrap metal." The second barrage was even more intense than the first. Every weapon system in the Vraxian fleet fired simultaneously, creating a light show that could be seen from neighboring star systems. Plasma beams thick as starship hulls crashed into the human vessels, while quantum torpedoes detonated in brilliant flashes of unleashed energy. And still, the human ships remained unharmed. "This is impossible," whispered Subcommander Crix, staring at the unchanged tactical display. "No species has ever withstood concentrated fire from an entire fleet. What kind of technology are these humans hiding?" Commander Yuki's four eyes blazed with fury and growing fear. In 30 years of conquest, he had never encountered resistance like this. Species either surrendered immediately or died quickly. They didn't just sit there and absorb planet-killing levels of firepower without showing so much as a scorch mark. "Sir," Science Officer Venth called out, her voice tight with worry, "I'm detecting massive energy buildup from all human vessels. Whatever they're doing, it's big." On the main screen, the 12 human ships began to glow with an inner light that seemed to pulse in perfect synchronization. The seemingly battered hulls started to shimmer and shift, as if reality itself was being rewritten around them. Captain Lee's voice suddenly filled the Vraxian bridge, transmitted on all frequencies with crystal clarity. "Commander Yuki, thank you for the field test of our defensive systems. Your weapons performed exactly as our computers predicted they would. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to calibrate our offensive capabilities. Please maintain your current positions." This won't take long. The transmission ended, leaving the Vraxian bridge in stunned silence, as 200 of the Empire's finest warships faced the terrifying realization that they might have made a very serious mistake. The transformation began slowly, almost gently, like watching a flower bloom in fast motion. What the Vraxians had dismissed as outdated cargo sections on the human ships started to unfold with mechanical precision that defied their understanding of engineering. Metal plates slid apart with barely a whisper, revealing hidden chambers that pulsed with energy signatures their sensors had never detected before. Commander Yuki's massive frame went rigid in his command chair as he watched the impossible unfold before his 4 golden eyes. "What in the void is happening to those ships?" he breathed, his voice barely above a whisper. The Soul's Pride led the transformation. What had appeared to be simple storage bays along its hull suddenly blossomed outward like the petals of some enormous mechanical flower. As each section opened, arrays of weapons emerged that seemed to bend light around them. The energy readings coming from these new configurations made the Vraxian sensors shriek warnings across every frequency. "Sir, those aren't cargo holds," Science Officer Venth reported, her voice shaking with disbelief. "They're weapon platforms, advanced weapon platforms. I'm reading energy signatures that our databases don't even have classifications for." But the weapons were only the beginning. The weathered, battle-scarred hulls that had looked so pitiful moments before began to shimmer like heat mirages. The metal itself seemed to flow like liquid, rearranging and reshaping as adaptive armor plating shifted into configurations the Vraxians had never seen. What had appeared to be damage from countless battles was actually sophisticated camouflage, designed to hide the most advanced defensive systems in known space. "Impossible," Sub-Commander Crix muttered, watching his tactical display update with information that challenged everything he thought he knew about human technology. "Those hull modifications are happening in real time. They're not just revealing hidden systems, they're actually rebuilding their ships while we watch." The 12 human vessels moved as one, their transformations synchronized down to the microsecond. As each ship completed its metamorphosis, they began to position themselves in a formation that looked less like a military arrangement and more like an intricate dance. Each vessel's position complemented the others perfectly, creating overlapping fields of fire and defensive coverage that turned the small fleet into a single devastating weapon system. Commander Yuki found his voice, though it came out as more of a croak. "How is this possible? Our intelligence reports said humans were barely capable of interstellar travel. They're supposed to be a young species, primitive and weak." "Sir," Weapons Officer Zeth called out, his claws trembling over his controls. "I'm trying to get target locks on their new configurations, but their ships keep shifting. It's like trying to hit smoke." The truth was even more disturbing than Zeth realized. The human ships weren't just changing their external appearance, they were actively adapting their entire structure based on the Vraxian attack patterns they had just analyzed. Every weapon frequency, every targeting system, every tactical approach the aliens had used was now being countered by ships that learned and evolved in real time. Captain Lee Hana's voice suddenly filled the void between the two fleets, broadcast on every frequency with crystal clarity that cut through the Vraxian communication networks like a blade through silk. "This is Captain Lee Hana of the Human Defense Fleet. Commander Yuki, your attack on our vessels has been noted and analyzed. We thank you for providing such comprehensive data on Vraxian military capabilities. The information will be quite useful." The formal politeness in her tone somehow made the words more terrifying than any threat could have been. "We will now demonstrate why humanity has survived every threat the galaxy has thrown at us over the past 3 centuries. Please observe carefully. This lesson is being recorded for transmission to every known civilization. The soul's pride began to glow with an inner light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The energy signature it projected made the Vraxian flagship's warning systems go completely insane, alarms blaring across the bridge as sensors tried desperately to categorize power levels that exceeded their maximum readings. "Sir, that single human ship is now showing an energy output greater than our entire fleet combined," Science Officer Venth reported, her voice barely audible over the shrieking alarms. "That's not possible. The laws of physics don't allow for that kind of power generation in a vessel that size." Lieutenant Park Minho looked up from his engineering station aboard the Soul's Pride, his fingers dancing across controls that managed power systems beyond alien comprehension. "Captain, all ships report full transformation complete. Harmony protocol is active and all vessels are now operating as a single combat unit. Energy distribution is optimal and all weapon systems are charging to full capacity." The 12 human ships had become something entirely different from what they had appeared to be. Gone were the weathered hulls and outdated designs. In their place floated vessels that seemed to be made of living metal and contained energy, their surfaces rippling with power patterns that created their own local gravitational fields. Captain Lee stood from her command chair, her movements calm and deliberate despite commanding enough firepower to glass entire star systems. Lieutenant Kim Jisoo, status of alien fleet positions. "All Vraxian vessels are maintaining aggressive formation, Captain. They appear to be in a state of tactical confusion. Their weapon systems are still active, but they're not firing. I believe they're beginning to understand their situation." "Excellent. Lieutenant Song Dami, open a channel to their commander." As the communication link established, Captain Lee's image appeared once again on the Vraxian flagship's main screen. But now, instead of standing on what had appeared to be the bridge of an outdated patrol vessel, she stood in what was clearly the command center of one of the most advanced warships the galaxy had ever seen. "Commander Yuki," she said, her tone still conversational, but carrying an undertone that made every alien on his bridge step back involuntarily. "I hope you've been taking notes. What you've witnessed is a standard human defense fleet patrol unit operating at approximately 15% of its total capability." The words hit the Vraxian bridge like physical blows. 15%. These ships that had just absorbed the concentrated firepower of an entire fleet and then transformed into something out of their worst nightmares were operating at 15% capability. "You wanted to see what happens when humanity is cornered," Captain Lee continued, her hand resting casually on what appeared to be a control surface that pulsed with barely contained energy. "Well, Commander, we've been cornered before. By species far more advanced than yours, by entities that considered themselves gods, by forces that sought to erase us from existence itself." She paused, letting her words sink in across the 200 alien vessels that suddenly felt very small and very vulnerable. "They all learned the same lesson you're about to learn. Humanity doesn't just survive. We adapt, we improve, and we make sure that whatever tried to destroy us can never threaten anyone else again." Lieutenant Park Minho's quiet voice carried across the bridge. "Captain, all ships report ready for Phase 3 operations. Harmony protocol is fully synchronized. We are prepared to demonstrate why humans earned their place among the stars." Captain Lee smiled that same polite smile she had shown throughout the encounter, but now it carried the weight of a species that had clawed its way up from a single world to become something the galaxy had never seen before. "Then let's show them what humans do when cornered," she replied quietly, her words somehow carrying across the vast emptiness of space to every alien ear that was listening. The first shot from the human fleet wasn't just a weapon discharge. It was a statement, written in pure energy across the fabric of space itself. The Soul's Pride fired what appeared to be a simple energy beam, but as it traveled toward its target, the beam began to change. It twisted and adapted mid-flight, analyzing the Vraxian ship's shields and restructuring itself to pass through them like they weren't even there. Commander Yuki watched in stunned silence as the beam struck the Vengeance to one of his most heavily armored cruisers. Instead of the expected explosion, the ship simply stopped. All lights went out, all weapons powered down. The mighty warship that had terrorized 3 star systems became nothing more than a drifting piece of metal in seconds. What did they do to the Vengeance? He demanded, his four eyes locked on the tactical display. Science Officer Venth worked frantically at her console, running every scan she could think of. Sir, the ship is intact, but all power systems have been neutralized. It's like their weapon didn't destroy our technology, it just convinced it to stop working. Before Yuki could process this information, the rest of the human fleet opened fire. But calling it opening fire was like calling a master painter making marks on canvas. Each of the 12 human vessels moved with perfect coordination, their weapons creating patterns of destruction that seemed almost too beautiful to be real. The second human ship targeted a cluster of Vraxian destroyers. Its weapon looked like a stream of liquid starlight that split into multiple beams mid-flight, each one seeking a different target. When the beams hit, they didn't explode the ships, they dismantled them. Piece by piece, component by component, the destroyers came apart like puzzles being taken apart by invisible hands. Sir, the Talon Squadron is reporting complete system failures, called Communications Officer Grix, his reptilian features pale with fear. They're not destroyed, they're just not working anymore. Their weapons, their engines, even their life support systems are shutting down one by one. The third human vessel demonstrated something even more terrifying. Its weapon created what looked like a bubble of distorted space around a group of Vraxian battleships. Inside the bubble, time itself seemed to slow down. The alien ships moved like they were trapped in thick liquid, their weapons firing in slow motion while the rest of the battle continued at normal speed around them. Commander, Yuki realized with growing horror that the humans weren't just attacking, they were demonstrating. Each weapon showed a different aspect of technology that shouldn't exist. Energy beams that rewrote matter at the molecular level, gravity waves that crushed ships without leaving a mark, quantum fields that made vessels phase out of normal space. Entirely. All ships, evasive maneuvers, he roared into his communicator. Random patterns, don't let them predict your movements. But it was already too late. The human ships had somehow anticipated every possible escape route. As Vraxian vessels tried to flee, they found their paths blocked by energy fields that appeared out of nowhere. Ships that tried to jump to hyperspace discovered that space itself had been twisted around them, trapping them in normal space, like insects in amber. Lieutenant Kim Jisoo aboard the Soul's Pride monitored the engagement with clinical precision. Captain, the Vraxian fleet is attempting to scatter. Their tactical AI is running through approximately 14,000 different escape scenarios per second. And how many of those scenarios result in successful escape? Captain Lee asked calmly. 0, Captain. The Harmony Protocol calculated their responses 47 minutes ago. Every possible move they could make has already been countered. What the Vraxians didn't understand was that they weren't fighting 12 individual ships. They were fighting a single entity that happened to be distributed across 12 hulls. The human vessels shared not just targeting data, but thoughts, predictions, and tactical adaptations in real time. When one ship learned something about Vraxian defensive measures, all 12 ships instantly knew it and adapted accordingly. The fourth human vessel targeted the Vraxian flagship's escort squadron with something that defied all known physics. The weapon appeared to fire backwards in time, hitting the alien ships a split second before it was actually fired. The escorts found themselves disabled by attacks that hadn't happened yet, their defensive systems trying to counter threats that existed in the future. "This is impossible," Sub-Commander Crick screamed, watching his tactical display show events that contradicted the laws of cause and effect. "How can they attack us with weapons that travel backwards through time?" "Sir, we're losing ships faster than our sensors can track," Weapons Officer Zeth reported, his claws clicking nervously against his console. "They're not destroying us. They're doing something worse. They're making our ships stop being warships. The destroyer is now broadcasting poetry on all frequencies. The Blood Fang has started growing flowers on its hull." The human attacks continued with methodical precision. Each engagement taught them more about Vraxian technology, and that knowledge was instantly shared across the entire fleet. Weapons that had worked moments before became useless as the human ships adapted their defenses. Tactics that had conquered entire civilizations crumbled as the humans anticipated and countered every move. Commander Yuki watched his mighty fleet being systematically dismantled by opponents who treated war like a science experiment. Ships that had brought terror to dozens of worlds were being converted into harmless objects with weapons that rewrote reality itself. "Retreat! All ships retreat!" he finally screamed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Emergency jump to hyperspace! Get us out of here!" But as his surviving vessels tried to escape, they discovered that the humans had somehow predicted even this. Hyperspace jump points were blocked by gravitational anomalies. Wormhole generators found their target coordinates scrambled. Even basic impulse drives began malfunctioning. As the human weapons affected their fundamental understanding of physics, the Vraxian fleet was being herded like prey animals, guided into tighter and tighter formations where the human ships could observe them more easily. Every attempt to break free only led them deeper into the trap that had been laid out before the battle even began. "Sir, incoming transmission from the human fleet," Communications Officer Grix reported, his voice barely a whisper. Commander Yuki looked around his bridge at the faces of officers who had never known defeat. Their scales had lost their luster, their eyes were wide with terror, and several were making religious gestures he hadn't seen since childhood. "Put it through," he whispered, his earlier arrogance completely shattered. Captain Lee's face appeared on the main screen once again. But now, instead of the polite military officer who had asked for time to discuss terms, Yuki could see the true nature of humanity looking back at him. There was no cruelty in her expression, no satisfaction at his defeat. Just the calm professionalism of someone who had done this many times before. "Commander Yuki," she said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "This engagement is concluded. Your fleet has been neutralized with minimal casualties on both sides. Surrender your remaining vessels, and we will provide medical assistance to your wounded." She paused, glancing at something off-screen before continuing. "I should mention that our medical technology is somewhat more advanced than our weapons. We can repair damage that your doctors would consider impossible to treat." The offer hung in space between them, like a lifeline thrown to a drowning man. Around the Vraxian flagship, the remnants of what had once been the most feared fleet in this sector of space drifted helplessly, their weapons silent and their crews wondering how the universe had changed so completely in the span of 30 minutes. 3 hours after the battle ended, Commander Yuki found himself in the strangest situation of his military career. Instead of being locked in a prison cell or tortured for information, he was sitting in what humans called a ready room aboard the Soul's Pride, watching Captain Lee prepare something called tea with the same calm precision she had used to dismantle his entire fleet. The room itself was a shock to his alien sensibilities. He had expected the interior of such an advanced warship to be all gleaming metal and pulsing energy conduits. Instead, he found himself in a space that felt almost comfortable. Soft lighting, furniture made from actual wood, and walls decorated with images of a blue-green world he assumed was Earth. "Your medical team says my officers will make full recoveries," Yuki said, his voice still hollow with disbelief. "The ones who were injured when their ships lost power and crashed into each other. Your doctors were able to repair internal injuries that our best surgeons would have considered fatal." Captain Lee nodded as she poured hot water over leaves in small ceramic cups. "Dr. Park Hyen is one of our best field medics. She's treated everything from plasma burns to dimensional displacement syndrome. Your crew's injuries were relatively straightforward." The casual way she mentioned dimensional displacement syndrome, as if it were a common cold, made Yuki's scales ripple with unease. Just how much did humans know about the galaxy that other species didn't? "I don't understand any of this," he admitted, accepting the cup she offered him. The liquid inside smelled pleasant, almost calming. "Your ships looked so ordinary. Weathered hulls, outdated designs, minimal visible weapons. How did you hide such incredible power? Our intelligence networks have files on every known advanced civilization, and humans weren't even mentioned in the military threat assessments." Lee settled into her chair, cradling her own cup of tea. Through the large viewport behind her, Yuki could see his surviving ships being carefully repaired by human engineering teams. Vessels that had been reduced to powerless hulks were already showing signs of restored function, but their weapon systems remained offline. "That was entirely intentional, Commander," she explained. "About 200 years ago, humanity encountered our first truly hostile alien species. They were called the Devourers, and they had a simple philosophy: destroy anything that might eventually become a threat." She paused to sip her tea, and Yuki noticed that her hands remained perfectly steady, despite discussing what sounded like an existential war. The Devourers were incredibly advanced, possibly millions of years older than human civilization. They had weapons that could crack planets and defensive shields that could absorb the energy of entire stars. When they found Earth, they intended to sterilize every human world as a preventive measure. "What happened?" Yuki found himself asking, genuinely curious despite his situation. "We learned," Lee said simply. "Humans have always been good at learning. From our enemies. We studied their technology, adapted their techniques, and improved on their designs. It took us 50 years of total war, but we eventually defeated them. Not by being stronger, but by being smarter." She gestured toward the viewport, where human repair crews worked on Vraxian ships with casual efficiency. "That war taught us something important about the galaxy. Most species judge threats based on appearance and displays of power. The bigger your ships, the more obvious your weapons, the more likely you are to be targeted by those who see you as competition. So we decided to do the opposite." Yuki set down his teacup, his 4 golden eyes fixed on her face. "You deliberately made yourselves look weak." "We made ourselves look unremarkable," Lee corrected. "There's a difference. Our ships appear to be the kind of vessels that a developing species might build, functional but not threatening. We use designs that suggest we're maybe a century or two ahead of basic spaceflight, nothing that would concern a galactic empire." The implications hit Yuki like a physical blow. "You've been hiding your true capabilities from everyone. Every species in the galaxy thinks humans are primitives barely capable of interstellar travel. And that suits us perfectly," Lee confirmed. "When you expect to fight primitives with plasma rifles, you don't prepare for opponents with weapons that can rewrite the laws of physics. When you assume a species is young and inexperienced, you don't anticipate tactical systems that can predict your every move." She stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars beyond. "The galaxy is full of species who survived by being the biggest predator in their region of space. They conquered their neighbors through superior firepower and intimidation, but humanity survived by becoming something different entirely." "What did you become?" Yuki asked, though part of him feared the answer. "We became the species that other species don't see coming," Lee replied quietly. "We learned to hide our strength behind apparent weakness, to make our most advanced technology look like obsolete equipment, and to present ourselves as harmless neighbors while maintaining the capability to defend against threats that most civilizations can't even imagine." The ready room fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Yuki found himself recalculating everything he thought he knew about the balance of power in the galaxy. "Commander," Lee said, turning back to face him, "your people will return home with a message. Tell them that Earth seeks peace with all species. We prefer trade agreements to military conflicts, cultural exchange to conquest. We want to be good neighbors." She paused, and for a moment, Yuki saw something in her expression that made his blood run cold. "But also tell them that we have prepared extensively for those who prefer war. This small patrol fleet, and yes, it truly is just a standard patrol unit, represents a tiny fraction of our defensive capabilities." Yuki's voice came out as barely a whisper. "How many ships like yours does humanity have?" Captain Lee smiled that same polite smile she had shown during their first contact, but now he could see the vast ocean of hidden strength behind it. "Enough, Commander. More than enough." Over the next several hours, as Vraxian crews were returned to their repaired ships and prepared for the journey home, word of the encounter began spreading through subspace communication networks. The story seemed impossible to believe. A tiny human patrol fleet had effortlessly defeated one of the most feared armadas in known space. Some species dismissed the reports as propaganda or exaggeration. Others began quietly reviewing their intelligence files on humanity, wondering what else they might have missed about the species from the small blue world. But in the highest levels of galactic government, certain individuals who had survived long enough to recognize patterns began to take notice. They remembered other young species that had appeared harmless until the day they revealed their true nature. They understood that the galaxy's balance of power had just shifted in ways that most civilizations wouldn't comprehend for years to come. As the surviving Vraxian ships limped toward their home space, they carried with them knowledge that would change how every species in the galaxy viewed humanity. The quiet neighbors who asked for nothing more than peaceful coexistence had revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Meanwhile, the 12 human ships resumed their patrol route, their hulls once again taking on the weathered, unremarkable appearance that had fooled so many others. To any casual observer, they looked like exactly what they appeared to be: outdated vessels crewed by a young species learning to navigate the complexities of galactic civilization. But now, scattered throughout the galaxy, there were survivors who knew the truth. They had seen what happened when humanity was pushed too far, and they would carry that knowledge with them for the rest of their lives. The message was clear. Humanity preferred peace, but they had prepared thoroughly for war. And in a galaxy full of predators who respected only strength, that preparation would ensure that the species from Earth could continue to appear harmless while remaining anything but defenseless. The end.